Has Hearthstone killed the Murloc archetype? With the release of Whizbang's Workshop and the rotation of the new year, I was excited to play with the new cards and see how the meta has been coming along. But something felt off. It was the lack of Murlocs. As I progressed down the ladder of ranked, I only saw the use of Murlocs by pesky bots and the occasional plucky paint fin, which in his defense, he's a great draw tool, but he deserves to be in a deck of his own. With this, I quickly went to r/Hearthstone to see if anyone else had noticed this problem themselves. Please ignore the grammatical errors, but I did ask, is it just me, or has Hearthstone been neglecting the Murloc archetype? When I first started playing, I loved Anything Can Happen, and other cards of that type that would make Murloc so much fun to play. Recently, the pool of Murlocs and their support has been slim to none, especially for Hearthstone's 10-year anniversary. I expected them to try to support such a popular archetype from their earlier years. Has the power creep just been too much to design Murloc cards? I'm curious how others feel about this. #Justice for TinyFin, who was taken out of the standard for the now current 0 mana 1/1 Snow Flipper Penguin. Within minutes I got support, but also some great feedback. I was reminded that within the new expansion, Whizbang the Splendiferous allows you to play a shaman deck that includes the Unite the Murlocs quest, which gives players the ability to play Murlocs. But I did have something to say in response. I like that they included the triple quest for shaman, but with the chances of getting the deck being a 1 in 11, I think, and most of the impactful Murlocs from the deck being in wild, it just doesn't feel great for the expansion. Murlocs still don't truly have a place in standard currently. And before I dive into the idea that Hearthstone has killed the Murloc archetype, or that the current state of Hearthstone doesn't allow for possible Murloc decks, I'd like to discuss some of the nostalgic Murloc decks that made Hearthstone what it was. In Classic, Murlocs weren't as strong, but they were present. With tools like Murloc Warleader and Old Murkai, they made up a decent deck but ran out of steam quickly, meaning that if you didn't get your Cold Light Oracles, you were in rough shape. After Classic, Murlocs were usually in zoo decks, up until the infamous League of Explorers expansion. And let me tell you, Sir Finley did not disappoint. We got some of the most impactful Murloc cards ever seen in the competitive scene. Murloc TinyFin, a 0 mana 1/1, was incredible, but even better was Anything Can Happen, a 10 mana resurrection card specifically for Murlocs, which reviving your Murlocs was great, but began the question, is there a way to kill your opponent with just this one card? Well, if you revive Murkai with 2 Bluegills, 2 Warleaders, and 2 Grimskull Oracles, you could do 30 damage. And if your opponents were without taunts or armor, it would completely destroy them. It was beautiful. After Anyfin's rotation, they didn't want to leave a Murloc-sized hole in our hearts, so they left us with Journey to Un'Goro, one of the most impactful and thematic expansions in Hearthstone's history. They released the most Murlocs we've seen since Classic, including the Unite the Murlocs, a quest that would reward you for playing Murlocs, with Megafin, a card that would reload your hand with more Murlocs to play. It started to seem like every rotation of a Murloc archetype, they would introduce a new Murloc style at the start of the year. With Rise of Shadows, we got Scargill and Underbelly Angler, which wasn't the best archetype for the class, but we were still able to play a tier 3 somewhat viable Murloc deck. The love of Murlocs was still there, and the support they gave it throughout the next 2 years helped both Shaman and Paladin decks find their footing with Sir Finley of the Sands, Tip the Scales, Magic Fin, Skyfin, and even the infuriating to play against Crab Rider. After the passing of Scargill, we got Firemancer Flurgle, with No Fin Can Stop Us, and more support for a newer edition of Murlocs. Up until Sunken City and March of the Lich King, we got support for Murlocs, even if it wasn't amazing. It also brought viable Warlock decks to the mix. Towards the end, we still got new gimmicks and interesting cards usable for a Murloc archetype. We have not gotten an impactful Murloc-related card to make a deck around since March of the Lich King. The closest we have gotten was the new Sir Finley card, which alters the board to 1/1 Murlocs, but there's no win condition or supporting cards for that as its backbone. This is the first rotation in Hearthstone's history where the ability to use Murlocs is quite impossible. We only got Plucky Paintfin, and again he's great, but there's no way he's the star of the show in this current expansion. Now we can go on to speculate why we did not receive a thematic Murloc card or Murloc support in the year of the Pegasus. The idea that it's in a Whizbang deck doesn't seem true. We've gotten a pirate-themed deck in both Whizbang and in the card release. Neither are that good, but they're both present in the new standard rotation. Does Hearthstone hate aggressive decks? We've gotten an increase in slower styled decks, but if they wanted to minimize the hit face tactic, why has Paladin gained so much support for it? At the end of the day, I'm assuming the production of new unique Murloc cards after 10 years is difficult. But I am upset that with all the impactful cards that got a recreation in the Whizbang Workshop expansion, there was nothing for one of the most impactful tribes in the game. What I suggest is that if it's difficult to create new Murloc cards, maybe take Murlocs in a new direction. Apply the possibility of Murlocs to a new class or with a new tribal requirement. I get that they're not as interesting as the if you're holding a dragon or if you played an elemental last turn mechanics, but giving Murloc a new flavorful style may help the creative process in the future. With the current teasers for the next expansion in the mix, it seems it will be a beach/tropical vibe, which has the lingering idea for Murloc decks. I'm very excited to see what Murloc archetypes will come from such an expansion, but the fact that the first set of the 2-year rotation doesn't have built-in Murloc archetypes is odd. Maybe the delay of Murlocs will make for better quality Murlocs in the future, but only the future is to know. Also, save Murloc Tinyfin from the dark abyss that is wild. Every day, Murloc Tinyfins are being brutally destroyed by hungry crabs around the world. If you believe in justice for Tinyfin, leave a like and a comment supporting Tinyfin back in standard. Also, if you like this video, consider subscribing. It helps the channel.
Job's done.